Tonight on Under Investigation, the death of an elderly woman provokes a public health emergency.
Food contaminated with listeriosis.
Thousands are at risk from a deadly bacteria in a sandwich.
As many as a third of people who get infection can die.
The catering company blamed for the fatal outbreak is shut down.
I've acted out of an abundance of precaution really in closing it.
But tonight we'll take you inside a very different story.
You can't comprehend the pain in which we went through in that moment.
Of a thriving family business destroyed by the government.
It's starting to look like a witch hunt at this point.
And the local council chief's disturbing conflict of interest.
I'd never seen anything like it.
As whistleblowers go public,
we've missed the opportunity about who the real culprit is.
And stunning evidence is revealed.
There is no natural way that this slug should ever have been there in our premises.
So you believe it was planted?
Going on the evidence, absolutely.
Is this slug the smoking gun of a conspiracy?
Really, you couldn't get a more serious allegation of deceptive behaviour.
Good evening, I'm Liz Hayes, and this is Under Investigation. Taking centre stage and making all the headlines in this extraordinary story.
It's one small slug causing one big headache.
This tiny mollusk.
We're sitting here today probably because of the slug.
Tonight, 4 experts will take us to the heart of this case and the shocking claim that the slug was planted evidence. The journalist, renowned Victorian crime reporter Andrew Rule. For the public, the presence of a slug was damning.
It was. It just seems to be a very convenient thing to find.
The judge, the Honourable Anthony Wheely KC, who served on New South Wales Criminal and Supreme Courts.
The whole matter involves suggestions of conspiracies left, right and centre.
The cop, former Victorian detective Paul Brady.
They not only closed down iCook Foods, but they absolutely destroyed the business and also trashed their reputation.
And the owner, Ben Cook, son of iCook's founder, Ian Cook. If there was one question you needed an answer to, what is it?
Why did you do it? 41 people. Our family business. Why did you do it?
It's the afternoon of February 22nd, 2019.
Thousands of people could be at risk from a listeria outbreak.
And Victoria's Acting Chief Health Officer, Professor Brett Sutton, is making an important announcement.
Potentially thousands of people have been exposed. We don't know the level of listeria contamination that might have occurred.
The alarm was raised after a woman in her 80s died after eating a meal at a private hospital in the eastern suburbs.
The company alleged to be responsible, iCook Foods, is being shut down.
Chief Health Officer from State Victoria just said to cease production now.
Watching Professor Brett Sutton, for the public, he was doing his job.
For the public, he was doing his job. The Chief Health Officer came out and said this could kill, thousands. It was an enormously public and dramatic stage-managed event.
Judge Wheely, public health is paramount.
Yes, a woman died. It was revealed that at least a contributing cause was a terrible bacteria called listeria, and the public health machinery moved into action, and I think that was the appropriate commencing point for what happened here. However, a business was ruined.
iCook's sandwiches and ready-to-eat meals allegedly posed such a public danger that Brett Sutton not only closed the company, but ordered 10 tonnes of its food to be dumped.
I understand that it's been deeply disruptive to Meals on Wheels, aged care facilities and a number of private hospitals in the eastern suburbs and southeast. But I've acted because I want to have an absolute assurance that no contaminated food would be supplied to these places.
But was it all an extreme overreaction? As our investigation begins, we can reveal Professor Sutton's urgency made little sense.
The evidence is strong that there's a link to a death, and that's why I needed to act urgently and proportionately at the time.
In fact, as we'll show, the evidence against iCook was shaky at best. 3 weeks had passed since the elderly woman's death, supposedly after eating an iCook sandwich. But in that time, the company had distributed 150,000 sandwiches to some of Melbourne's most at-risk patients. And not a single case of listeria infection had been reported or would ever be reported. Now, our first whistleblower takes us inside this scandal and raises the possibility that iCook Foods was ruined for no reason.
I wanted to stand up and tell the truth because I want people to be aware that I believe that the decisions being made around the closure of iCook Foods was just unjust and unfair.
Ray Christie was the health inspector sent in to investigate Knox Private Hospital, where the elderly patient had died. He is speaking publicly tonight for the first time.
That moment when I'm doing this investigation at Knox Private, I'm thinking to myself, it didn't feel right at the time, and now I'm pretty certain it doesn't feel right at all.
In a direct contradiction of what Brett Sutton told the Victorian public, Christie says he found no evidence that iCook was the source of the listeria infection at Knox Private.
In my opinion, there wasn't a link between the patient's death and the food provided by iCook Foods. I couldn't find it as a result of my investigation.
So what of the company being blamed? iCook Foods had been in business for more than 30 years, providing chilled, pre-packed meals to retirement homes, hospitals and Meals on Wheels throughout Victoria.
There was approximately 50,000 different components went out, whether that be sandwiches, soups, salads. We loved it. It was a real passion and it was something that we all came together and delivered a really quality product.
The Cook's family firm employed over 40 people, some with disabilities, who would all lose their jobs. iCook had one of the state's best records for hygiene and food safety and had always followed health directives.
The cooks were always gracious, and I would look at everything from cleanliness to processes to procedures that they were doing.
Our second whistleblower tonight is former Dandenong Council Health Inspector Kim Rogerson, who dealt with iCook for years.
When you go and do an inspection of a premises of that calibre, there isn't a premises out there really that would be 100% clear on everything. It's not possible.
The Department of Health in Victoria had a protocol for what to do, and listeriosis was a notifiable disease under the Public Health and Wellbeing Act.
Judge Wheely has looked at the case for us and also examined iCook's history of health inspections before its shutdown. Did you find anything that concerned you?
There were inspections from time to time. You know, like every business, there are things that need correction and looking after from time to time, but nothing of any significance, no.
Ben, was there ever any issue with compliance,
No.
food and safety over your history?
No. So when it comes to food safety, you can have auditors, you can have inspections by health officers, and you can get recommendations by those auditors or health inspectors to say, hey, look, you know, that this needs to be improved, and that's the benchmark and that's the setting you want to achieve.
Given iCook's exemplary health record, Kim Rogerson was appalled that Brett Sutton closed the family company in such a shockingly public way.
In my over decade of inspections of thousands of places, I'd never seen anything like it.
As you'll see, Kim's evidence of what went on behind the scenes at Dandenong Council, including serious allegations of evidence tampering, lend weight to the suggestion that iCook's closure was not only unprecedented, it may have been baseless.
I've never actually heard of a Department of Health naming and shaming a business.
We always did the right thing. We always followed the rules. So to have what happened to us, it was a shock. It was horrible.
To iCook's founder and owner, Ian Cook, it was heartbreaking. He'd built the company from nothing, only to lose it all after a single and, as we'll prove tonight, ill-advised press conference.
They just came in and destroyed, not just like myself, my family. There were 41 other people that were employed by that business. It was devastating, absolutely devastating.
Ben, if that's your dad and you've lived with him and this for some time now, can you explain just how shattering it was?
It's hard to watch your dad. My mum and dad started that business, just the two of them. And they built it up, and like he said, there is my family. Then there was our staff, which was just like extended family. You can't comprehend the pain in which we went through in that moment when that blow was struck.
The Cook family claims their company was scurrilously targeted by health inspectors from Dandenong Council who were advising Brett Sutton. And in our investigation, we've discovered an extraordinary conflict of interest at the heart of the council that our expert panel finds hard to believe.
Very disturbing, very disturbing. So I just cannot understand why that conflict was allowed.
John Benny is CEO of Dandenong Council. He had the legal authority to shut down iCook. But at the time, John Benny was also a director of iCook's main rival, the catering company Community Chef, which could profit from iCook's closure.
Andrew Rule, what do you know about this situation?
Clearly a conflict between John Benny, a long-standing CEO and official at Dandenong Council, someone who had been a key figure in organising a group of councils who put money into the Community Chef. So he's a very central person in all this.
Coming up,
we're seeing a council person do things that don't seem to be totally neutral or reasonable.
The case.
There is a clear chain of evidence to show that we didn't do this
for a conspiracy.
In my experience, most conspiracies turn out to be cock-ups.
That's next on Under Investigation. Tonight, we're investigating the extraordinary saga known as Sluggate.
So I've acted out of an abundance of precaution really in closing it.
At a damning press conference, Victorian Health Chief Brett Sutton shut down family business iCook Foods.
There have been a number of positive samples that have turned up in the kitchen.
He claimed the company supplied food contaminated with listeria to an elderly hospital patient who would later die.
For the public, he was doing his job.
For the public, he was doing his job.
But from the moment iCook was shut down, there have been serious questions about the treatment of the company by the Health Department and Dandenong Council acting for them.
Ian Cook claims it was cooked up by the City of Greater Dandenong Council as part of a conspiracy to shut him down.
Whether iCook was the victim of a conspiracy, and if so, why, are the questions facing our table tonight.
But sometimes there are conspiracies, and the evidence which we're getting to in this program is that no one thing taken in isolation is necessarily sinister, but when you add them all together in a sequence, it starts to look like an unfolding story.
The whole matter involves suggestions of conspiracies left, right and centre, but in my experience, most conspiracies turn out to be cock-ups.
Here's what our investigation has revealed so far. Professor Sutton declared a health emergency, claiming the public was at imminent risk from allegedly contaminated iCook foods.
Potentially thousands of people have been exposed.
We've shown that was a gross overstatement. iCook had already distributed 150,000 meals since the patient's death, and not a single case of listeria had been reported, strongly suggesting iCook Foods was not an imminent risk to the public. And in a direct contradiction of Professor Sutton, Health Inspector Ray Christie, who was ordered in to investigate the listeria outbreak, found no evidence the patient had even eaten iCook foods.
In my opinion, there wasn't a link between the patient's death and the food provided by iCook Foods.
Professor Sutton announced a public health emergency on the basis that iCook was the only catering company supplying Knox Private Hospital.
The patient only consumed food from the hospital, with all food provided by Knox Private Hospital's sole caterer, iCook Foods.
But Brett Sutton was wrong. In fact, Knox Private was supplied by 6 other food manufacturers, and the hospital's own kitchen also made patients' meals.
Ben, Professor Sutton did say that iCook was the sole supplier, is that right?
He did say that.
And is that true?
No, it's not.
You know that there are other suppliers to the hospital.
Nor can the hospital's designated health inspector, Ray Christie, explain Sutton's belief that iCook was its sole supplier.
Why focus on the one supplier when I knew, being to the hospital kitchen in the past, knowing that there are several suppliers of food products, especially in relation to ham?
More than 2 years after he closed iCook, ruining the business, Professor Sutton finally admitted his mistake.
When I previously addressed the inquiry, I erroneously referred to iCook being Knox Private Hospital's sole caterer. This is what was initially understood and had been told to me. I've since been informed that subsequent information provided by Mr. Christie indicated that this was incorrect, and I do apologise for any confusion caused.
When you go down a path like that, you've got to be absolutely sure of your facts, and there's no way known this guy was sure of his facts.
According to former Victorian detective Paul Brady, who spent 3 years investigating the case, ignorance is no excuse when the future of a company hangs in the balance.
They couldn't have possibly been as thorough as they should have been, given the ramifications of, the closure and everything else that followed.
Judge, the hospital's own kitchen didn't get attention for some time.
Oh yes, it does seem very odd that they don't immediately go and do some testing in the hospital itself. I would not argue with that for a minute.
To me, if this was a matter that was fast-moving and urgent and so serious, you wouldn't explore every opportunity? You wouldn't investigate the hospital itself and swab it? Why the tunnel vision?
Yes, why wasn't there testing on all levels?
What about the other suppliers? What about the kitchen that supplied food?
Okay,
that seems like a categorically obvious one to test.
So what evidence did Brett Sutton claim to have when he shut down the family company?
She got invasive listeria disease from eating contaminated food that was linked to iCook kitchen both epidemiologically and genomically.
It sounds convincing, but we'll seriously question the scientific testing Brett Sutton relied upon.
I originally took 23 samples, and also I did 11 swabs around the sandwich area, some of the equipment, floor, just to sort of cover the bases.
Responsibility for testing at iCook Foods fell to veteran Dandenong Council Health Inspector Kim Rogerson.
They were very, very good about following the directions and everything that I asked them to do.
She took samples at iCook on February the 1st, 2019, a week after listeria was first detected in the elderly patient.
I've been told that Kim Rogerson was regarded widely as hard but fair.
This is an emergency? This is an important event.
Of course it is. I mean, a woman's died, and there's been this big press conference, the government's involved, the health department's involved. It's a very big event. And so it was a matter of great urgency that someone like Kim go and do what she does best.
The cooks were always gracious. And when you go and do an inspection of a premises of that calibre, there isn't a premises out there really that would be 100% clear on everything. It's not possible.
Despite Brett Sutton's claim that listeria was found in iCook's kitchen, in fact, no trace was found in any of its food preparation areas. But 7 samples from iCook sandwiches returned low-level traces of the bacteria.
Their response was an absolute listeria clean down, washing, doing everything that the listeria cleanup involved, including a professional cleaning of the premises.
According to our insiders, at this point, shutting down the company usually wouldn't be considered.
When you go back to do your follow-up inspection, if they can give you the evidence that they've taken the mitigation action, you give them the okay to commence operating.
Like many food preparation businesses, iCook had dealt with listeria outbreaks before.
It's everywhere. It's out in the soil. You'll consume it as a healthy adult and it'll go straight through your system.
The bacteria is commonly found at low levels throughout the environment, as iCook's founder Ian Cook knew well.
As everybody would know, listeria does turn up, and we've had it turn up in our factory before. If it turns up, then we isolate the area, make sure it's cleaned down.
Having cleaned down the factory, the Cook family waited for the all clear from Dandenong Council, with no idea of the storm that was about to break over them.
One inspection to close down a 35-year business, 41 employees, like that.
Coming up, the sandwich.
We went and tested a batch of ham that we had bought in from our manufacturer.
The small goods.
Because the proper inquiries haven't been made, we've missed the opportunity about who the real culprit is.
And the slug that set this case alight.
A slug looks terrible.
Wonderfully convenient.
That's next on Under Investigation. An elderly hospital patient has died, and Victoria's health chief, Brett Sutton, has shut down a 30-year family catering company for allegedly supplying food contaminated with listeria.
Potentially thousands of people have been exposed.
But the company, iCook Foods, has hit back and says it's been wrongly targeted.
The evidence they didn't have, and when they tried to gather it after the event, they were shown wanting.
Now, as our investigation continues, we go inside the suspect sandwich that helped bring down iCook Foods and make a shocking revelation.
There is a clear chain of evidence to show that we didn't do this, yet they didn't want to hear it.
It's February the 1st, 2019.
I originally took 23 samples, and also I did 11 swabs around the sandwich area, some of the equipment, floor.
Dandenong Health Inspector Kim Rogerson's swabs pick up no listeria anywhere in iCook's factory, apart from low-level traces in some of its sandwiches, specifically those made with small goods, ham and corned beef. Although the Cook family doesn't know it at the time, the entire future of their company will rest on these small goods.
We said from the very get-go that it would be in the small goods.
Under Victorian law, iCook is not responsible for contaminated meat products supplied to it by outside manufacturers. Small goods have to be certified free of contamination by the supplier.
So the small goods is delivered to you by a supplier.
Third-party manufacturer.
You don't make that.
No.
And it's incumbent upon the supplier to ensure it is fit for consumption.
Correct.
But focusing solely on iCook, the health department failed to check with the suppliers of the small goods, failed to test samples of ham and corned beef that could have been the source of the listeria. So, Ben Cook commissioned his own testing.
We went and tested a batch of ham that we had bought in from our manufacturer. We sent it to the federal laboratory, who detected from the sealed product from the manufacturer listeria in the packet of ham.
Ben's results are proof that contamination was brought into iCook.
We didn't do this. It came in on small goods, yet they didn't want to hear it.
As veteran health inspector, now whistleblower, Ray Christie explains, a chance to find the real source of the listeria outbreak may have been missed.
Because in this investigation the proper inquiries haven't been made, we've missed the opportunity about where the real source is and who the real culprit is, especially in relation to ham.
It's difficult to understand why, at the height of what Brett Sutton considered a public health emergency, testing was not carried out at the source of the small goods. Small goods which were also supplied to many other catering firms and restaurants across Melbourne and potentially Australia.
Paul, if this is where the contamination is in the small goods, why would you not shut them down?
And they should have made a nexus between the source of the listeria and the patient. Once it's established that the listeria come from a particular factory, that factory should have been investigated.
Andrew Rule, knowing that there's a component in the sandwich that comes back with listeria, it would make sense to go to the source?
I would have thought so. If the meat is the problem, you have to sheet the problem home to the supplier of the meat.
But they didn't, and there was still no clear evidence that the patient had even eaten an iCook sandwich. But on February the 18th, 2019, Dandenong Council, reporting to the Health Department, suddenly goes into overdrive. It's the follow-up inspection iCook has been expecting for weeks. But instead of Kim Rogerson, this time the job falls to another council health inspector. Her name, Elizabeth Garlick. For the Cook family, despite believing they've done everything right, her visit will be the beginning of the end.
Her report will become 48 charges against my father of one attendance to our facility.
We've obtained the handwritten notes Elizabeth Garlick made during her visit to iCook's facility on February the 18th. On the page, her entries seem fairly innocuous.
I mean, it says things like hand wash basin in hospital food prep room turned off.
Okay, so she doesn't list the fact that was one hand wash basin out of a total of 9 hand wash basins throughout the entire production area of the floors. We had 8 other hand wash basins available.
Just like Kim Rogerson before her, Elizabeth Garlick also takes swabs to test for listeria. All those swabs are negative. But it's this note we've discovered, seemingly written just after her visit, that Ben Cook finds most troubling.
She makes the notation that they are looking to close us after one investigation.
One inspection.
One inspection, and Elizabeth Garlick's first idea is to close down a 35-year business, 41 employees, like that.
Your observation?
Well, my observation is we're hearing only one side of the story based upon scrutiny of a scribbled note.
But it begs a question, doesn't it?
Well, it raises a question.
Andrew Rule?
It's starting to look more like a witch hunt at this point. We're seeing a council person turn up and do things that don't seem to be totally neutral or reasonable.
But at this point, it seems a dramatic escalation, I guess.
An escalation, yeah. And it gathers strength after this.
Coming up,
there is no natural way that this slug should ever have been there in our premises.
The slug that sank iCook.
For the public, the presence of a slug was damning.
It was.
We reveal stunning evidence.
Was told, oh, we're just tidying it up. And I thought, no, you're not.
That suggests it was planted.
Serious allegation.
But you couldn't get a more serious allegation of deceptive behaviour.
That's next on Under Investigation. Tonight, we're investigating the Victorian health saga known as Sluggate. We've revealed there are serious questions being asked about the dramatic closure of the long-established family business iCook Foods by Chief Health Officer Brett Sutton.
There's really no other reasonable explanation that the source of the patient's infection was anything other than iCook Foods.
iCook claims it was wrongly targeted and says it has plenty of reasons to believe that.
There is a clear chain of evidence to show that we didn't do this, yet they didn't want to hear it.
It's February the 18th, 2019. Dandenong Health Inspector Elizabeth Garlick is visiting iCook's factory. Her inspection notes, which we've obtained, are a scant 2 pages of seemingly minor health infractions. But the next day, she turns those notes into a formal report that is utterly damning of iCook's factory. The final straw and the final entry in Garlick's report is what she said she found on iCook's floor: a slug. The slug was found by Elizabeth Garlick in a hidden corner of the factory while accompanied by co-owner Michael Cook, Ben's uncle.
She walks into this corner with her back to my uncle. She has only 2 walls in front of her and she squats down for 17 seconds. And it's during that time she suddenly stands up and exclaims to my uncle, "Look, I've found a slug."
For the public, the presence of a slug was damning.
It was. It captures the attention. I mean, we're sitting here today making this program probably because of the slug.
A slug looks terrible.
Wonderfully convenient.
Is that how you see it?
It just seems to be a very convenient thing to find.
It's alleged that the slug would have entered here through the emergency exit with a return flap on the outside.
Ben Cook is incredulous any slug could have made its way into the premises, let alone survive.
Parameters around the slug arriving in our facility is quite extraordinary when you step through it.
The floors had been chemically cleaned.
The floors are washed down with a chlorine wash and the floor was dry. The floor is a sand grit surface. Somehow ignored the bait stations, didn't get seen by all the staff inside. There were no slug trails around the slug at all, and it wasn't exactly moving like a slug might. It was pretty well stationary.
It was also midsummer.
Slugs are nocturnal. This was 1 o'clock in the middle of the day.
An expert scientific report we've obtained concluded it is extremely unlikely that the slug in question entered the factory on its own volition.
There is no natural way that this slug should ever have been there in our premises, let alone we've never seen one ever before. And the only factor that leads me to believe that it is being placed there is because Elizabeth Garlick came into our facility.
Ben Cook's uncle, Michael, who was nearby when Elizabeth Garlick declared she'd found the slug, took this photo at almost the same time she did. It shows a small piece of tissue paper near the slug. To the Cooks, this photo, compared with this one, where the piece of tissue is missing, submitted by Dandenong Council, is the smoking gun in the whole Sluggate affair. And that is the allegation that the photograph of the slug taken by Health Officer Elizabeth Garlick was photoshopped.
What would be the point of photoshopping?
Well, to have a piece of tissue next to the slug, to us indicates that when it was planted, some of the tissue has fallen off, depositing the slug from her pocket.
The cooks allege that Elizabeth Garlick was seen entering iCook's facility on the day the slug was found, with tissues visible in her clothes that they believe may have concealed the slug.
One of your employees saw Miss Garlick walk into your office with a tissue hanging out of her pocket.
So you believe it was planted?
Going on the evidence, absolutely.
And the company's suspicions are shared by former Dandenong Council Health Inspector Kim Rogerson.
I turned round and Elizabeth had two screens. So on one screen was a picture of the slug, a normal coloured picture with a triangle of tissue about, the size of your little fingernail or something. And on the other screen, she had a red circle around this piece of tissue that was near the slug.
Rogerson alleges she witnessed Elizabeth Garlick and a colleague working on the picture.
And I said, "What are you guys doing?" And looking at it thinking, oh my God, and was told, "Oh, we're just tidying it up." And I thought, no, you're not. There was no tissue in that photograph.
Serious allegation.
Yes, look, it's such a serious allegation. Really, you couldn't get a more serious allegation of deceptive behaviour. But we do know that Miss Garlick has denied vehemently that she did this.
Elizabeth Garlick declined to talk to us, but this is what she told a Victorian parliamentary inquiry.
The slug was not planted and the photo was definitely not altered in any way. And I believe I've provided evidence and information previously in relation to that matter.
The chairperson of that parliamentary inquiry into the closing of iCook would later state, "We've all become quite confident that photo was doctored." But within a week of finding the slug, iCook Foods was shut down. Having been publicly named and shamed, the business was ruined. Then, Dandenong Council takes the company to court.
A caterer shut down over listeria fights for survival in court.
iCook is charged
with an astonishing 96 serious breaches of Victoria's Food Act, with potentially $11 million in fines and jail time for Ian Cook.
Dandenong Council's case is based on Health Inspector Elizabeth Garlick's damning report, which includes the infamous slug. But in a stunning turnaround, on the first day of the trial, the council drops all charges.
Sweet relief. After months of turmoil, staff and the owners of iCook Foods can celebrate.
They issued 96 charges, 48 for my father, 48 for the business, and within 5 hours completely stopped, took it all back and said, we're not going to charge them.
Judge Wheely, when those charges were dropped, iCook didn't have a case to answer.
No, they did not. And it's always a very disturbing fact when a regulatory authority issues a great number of charges and then drops them.
It is an extraordinary scenario, though, isn't it?
Yes,
a business and a man.
In the light of all the other matters that we've discussed, it leaves a very sour taste in the mouth.
But iCook's vindication in court came well after they'd been shut down. And returning to the night that decision was made, we can reveal a final extraordinary twist in our investigation. The strange circumstances of the shutdown itself. It's late in the evening, the night before iCook's closure. A phone call between Health Chief Brett Sutton and John Benny, Dandenong Council CEO. They're finalising the decision to shut down iCook the next morning. But John Benny is revealing an astonishing conflict of interest. Not only is he the council's CEO with the legal authority to close iCook, he is also a director of iCook's main rival, Community Chef, which could profit from iCook's closure. So, Brett Sutton alone will make this decision and take the responsibility for the shutdown order. But John Benny's conflict of interest is a revelation that concerns all at our table tonight.
Judge Wheely, conflicts of interest are never good, are they, when we have situations like this?
Very disturbing. Very disturbing. I think the fact that the CEO of the council is in a position with community chef is inexplicable to my mind, since the council has the job of overseeing community chef and its operations. So I just cannot understand why that conflict was allowed to exist in the first place.
So you've got a situation where the council's in charge of doing checks and balances on other catering companies.
Difficult to see any way in which that could be justified or approved. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you know this?
Yes, we knew this. At no point were they able to be impartial in their regulation of our food premises when they were conflicted by owning the direct rival of our business.
Coming up,
It doesn't pass pub test.
suspicion mounts.
Did the Department of Health have sufficient evidence to warrant the closure, and did they follow proper process?
Was iCook innocent all along?
41 people. Our family business. Why did you do it?
That's next on Under Investigation. Tonight, we've investigated the case of iCook Foods. The successful family company shut down for allegedly supplying food contaminated with listeria, which allegedly contributed to the death of an elderly hospital patient.
If I had not closed at the time I did, there was a significant risk of many vulnerable Victorians contracting listeria.
But our investigation has revealed serious questions about the evidence Victorian Health Chief Brett Sutton claimed to have against iCook and how it was obtained.
Public health is paramount. However, when that process isn't followed and decisions are recklessly made, and with the body of evidence we have before us, it shows to us that that has clearly been the case. Lives are destroyed, our staff, our business, my family.
All food provided by Knott's Private Hospital's sole caterer, iCook Foods.
We've shown there were 6 other catering companies supplying the hospital. None were checked, nor for some weeks was the hospital's own kitchen. And according to our insider, Ray Christie, there was no evidence he could find incriminating iCook Foods.
In my opinion, there wasn't a link between the patient's death and the food provided by iCook Foods.
The manufacturers of the ham and corned beef supplied to iCook were also not investigated, as they should have been.
It's starting to look more like a witch hunt at this point.
Serious doubts have been expressed about how the infamous slug came to be in iCook's facility.
There is no natural way that this slug should ever have been there in our premises.
So you believe it was planted?
Going on the evidence, absolutely.
Whistleblower Kim Rogerson alleges she witnessed pictures of the slug being photoshopped at Dandenong Council.
I said, "What are you guys doing?" and was told, "Oh, we're just tidying it up." And I thought, no, you're not.
And finally, there's the extraordinary conflict of interest involving John Benny, the CEO of Dandenong Council, who was also a director of iCook's main commercial rival, catering firm Community Chef.
Very disturbing. Very disturbing. I think the fact that the CEO of the council is in a position with Community Chef is inexplicable to my mind.
Andrew Rule, do you think this is the stuff that doesn't pass the pub test?
It doesn't pass pub test, and it's easy for others to roll their eyes at conspiracy theories, but sometimes there are conspiracies. And the evidence I feel in this program is that it's gathering strength that no one thing taken in isolation is necessarily sinister, but when you add them all together in a sequence, it starts to look like an unfolding story.
2 Victorian parliamentary inquiries into the closure of iCook Foods were critical of how the company was treated, saying iCook Foods was not dealt with in a fair or consistent way. But founder Ian Cook believes there is much more to be revealed and has launched civil action against the Victorian Health Department and Dandenong Council.
When someone takes everything off you, there's nothing else you do. You have to come out and say, no, this is wrong, and take a stand. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And I don't care how long it takes.
I think it's important to restate that public health is paramount. But in this case, in the pursuit of mitigating a perceived threat, was the cost to a family business, its reputation, and the loss of jobs reasonable? What do you say, Paul?
Well, I think in the circumstances it was unreasonable that they not only closed down iCook Foods, but they absolutely destroyed the business and threw 40-odd people out of work and also trashed their reputation.
Judge Wheely, was it reasonable in the pursuit of public health that this family suffered terribly?
Well, it's been a tragedy for the Cook family, no doubt about that. For me, this program ends where it began. That is, did the Department of Health have sufficient evidence to warrant the closure, and did they follow proper process? There can't be, in my mind, a clear answer at this stage. There are a lot of questions that remain unanswered, and perhaps they will be answered in the litigation that ensues.
Andrew Rule, final thoughts from you?
The truth will probably come out in a civil action, and the truth will be very embarrassing for some people, I think.
And Ben Cook, you obviously feel that public health is paramount, as I've said, but if there was one question you needed an answer to, what is it?
Why did you do it? 41 people. Our family business. Why did you do it?
Well, in closing, if you or anyone you know has any information that may help us further this investigation, we'd like to hear from you. You can contact us at our confidential email address under investigation@9.com.au. Thank you all very much for joining me. I'm Liz Hayes. Good night. Hello, I'm Liz Hayes. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minute segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.